All right, guys, welcome back to the Shatter Dome. Should be exciting. I have a list of completely random things to discuss with you guys. Let me see if I can break out the chat. Probably won't even get to all of them, but normally I have nothing to talk about. But it always seems like the beginning of the year is a good time to start being more productive. And I always do a horrible job of it. And I'm like, I'm gonna do 4 videos a week forever. And then a week in and I haven't done anything. So that's me. But here we are tonight. Bunch of different stuff we can talk about. Totally unrelated. It's not totally unrelated. It's all related to the world disintegrating. But other than that, there's probably not much related. Let me see. Somebody throw something in the chats just to make sure I'm not screaming into the void that you can see and hear me before I go too crazy. But I have at least 7 potential topics. Might get off into the weeds. In fact, I know I get off into the weeds. Hello. Hey, I appreciate the card. Thank you. I just checked my what do you call it? P.O. box. Finally. I'm not good about it, but I really do appreciate the people who've sent stuff. So thank you. Reminds me that there's real it's weird doing YouTube stuff, and even though you interact with people via comments and things like that, it's easy to forget that there's real people on the other side of all this. So it's kind of cool to get that real interaction. I appreciate that always. And I still to this day, I think have only seen one person in real life that like recognized me. And it was at a it was when my channel was much, probably half this size. Um, yeah, Void screaming back, right? It was when my channel was like half this size or maybe less. And I went to a prepping convention back in Florida, and obviously that's a pretty auspicious place to meet someone who might be, come across my channel. But other than that, I don't think I've had anyone be like, "Hey, you make YouTube videos?" Which is weird because it seems to happen to people who have only maybe not slightly large, but if someone has like 200,000 subscribers, it seems to happen to them all the time. So it seems like with 50,000 subscribers, it should happen a quarter of the time, but it doesn't seem to work that way. There's like an exponential thing, and that weirdly enough, there's also an exponential thing with the like trolls and haters and whatnot that seems to happen around the 80,000 to 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, maybe 10 to 40,000 followers on Twitter, where like people who have fewer than that just don't even understand. Like even I'll look at someone like I think it was like Prepper Princess or somebody who's talking about all the absolute maniacs, and I'm sure it's worse for women too, but just in general, these bigger channels. And you would assume that like I would have half as many weirdos, stalkers, haters as someone who had 100,000 subscribers, but it doesn't really work that way. There's like this threshold of now you've become this kind of e-celeb and you get that kind of attention, which doesn't just happen. It doesn't break, it doesn't break down based on it's not linear. Let's put it that way. It's exponential. Yeah, welcome to the wonderful 2024. I'm sure it will be just thrilling. It'll be breathtaking, to quote Seinfeld. But that's not necessarily good. And that's one of the things I wanted to get into first is I don't remember who it was. I think it was Everyman Prepping or someone. It was originally a Canadian prepper had posted something about uh I think the Canadian like brief internet outages, and then Everyman Prepping had reposted that on Twitter, and I responded to him like he was saying, "Hey, is this one of these cyber attacks that they seem so keen on bringing up all the time?" And honestly, I think a lot of the stuff that we're seeing, that's obviously a huge risk. I definitely feel like something like that's going to happen, whether that's the predictive programming that I don't really buy into in the sense that most people mean it, or just the fact that everyone's talking about it because it's, becoming more and more of a possibility, more and more of an actual thing. But the scarier, more insidious element of all these little things happening like that, and that most of us are even less prepared for than a major event like a big cyber attack or something, is the fact that the West, particularly the US, Canada, UK, and all what would be considered, all these Western countries are just descending into second world status. And that is worse than like a big cyber attack or one singular type of event or terrorist attack, because it's going to be longer. It's going to be more widespread. It's going to affect everything where stuff's just not going to work anymore. And it's getting worse. Stuff is just not good. the systems, the infrastructure, the people you have to interact with. Nothing is as trustworthy, nothing is as reliable, nothing is as resilient, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. Seeing planes, panels fly off of them, and they're still continuing to say, "Oh, we need to make half our pilots women and minorities, regardless of if you're actually good at being a pilot or not. That's more important to us." Meanwhile, the planes are falling apart, the flights are getting canceled and shut down for, entire days sometimes. Stuff that would make the news for a week if it had happened a couple of years ago. Now it barely gets a passing blip because it's just one and another string of things getting worse. And I think these like internet being crappier, the utilities going to be spotty in the future, just all this stuff like this is going to continue to get worse and worse. And SPQR Cincinnati says there needs to be a new word that describes the Great Decline. Yeah, something talking about like the forever SHTF or something. And that's what people, I think, in these Western countries too, they think of like uh America or the first world and then everything else. But if you're in these other countries, the only major difference they have, like if you go to like Mexico City, for example, anything you can get here in America almost is available there, you know, but it's just a question of how many people have access to that because of the cost. How reliable is it? What hoops do you have to jump through? What kind of bureaucratic mess? What kind of corruption? But it's not like they don't have internet. It's not like they don't have any of the various luxuries that you could find in other major cities. It's just that elimination of the middle class, of the fact that like a normal person in this country can expect stability and some level of comfort. Like that's what disappears, and that's what's happening in the West. And I think that's what's going to continue to get worse. Yeah, it is like a systemic rot, but it's in more specifically that middle, the average is just dissolves away to where, there's a chasm between if you have a little bit of money, all the same normal stuff is available to you. Like it's not like they don't have internet or electricity or any of this stuff. You can get all these things in these second world countries too. It's just how much money do you need to do it compared to the average person there? And what is it like if you dip below average? That's the big thing. Like it's in the US for, several decades, it's been a very like linear trend for the amount of money. There's no big cutoff like, oh, if you're just going to die in a ditch if you have less than this amount of money, and then as soon as you're over that, you can live normally. No, it's just, a little bit of extra, every little bit of money you get additionally gives you a little bit of extra quality of living. And even the bums aren't going to die of starvation and whatnot unless they're, it's due to a drug-addled craziness. Like no one in the US, even still, really, is dying in the streets because there's just no options available. And um, emergency rooms and whatnot still have to treat you. So if you're starving to death and someone calls the ambulance, they're going to pick you up and put you on an IV or something that you're going to be charged for probably, but never have to pay for and whatnot. So that type of stuff is what's going to change. Eventually, that middle ground is going to disappear. So let's see. And also, one of the weird things about as we descend into that is just being aware. Like I've seen a lot of stuff from because especially if you're just above that threshold where you have enough money, where you haven't lost access to any of these things, and it just seems like things are getting a little bit crappy, a little bit more unreliable. It's very easy to not realize how bad things have gotten until there's 3, 4 dudes that follow you home from the grocery store and break into your house and do God knows what. So that's, I think, situational awareness and obviously prepping, but I'm assuming we're all on board with that because we're all here. But recognizing when these things are a potential danger, when they become potentially unreliable, and what to do about it. And I don't know, I've been thinking about how you would train that. Like there's probably some drills you can do. Focusing on what you would need to look for is probably the most important thing. I've always been pretty good about visual and like literally a situation that's physically around me and noticing weird things. I'm not good at noticing certain types of ongoing like patterns. It may just be the difference between men and women, but like my girlfriend will be like, it's like that scene in Airplane where she's like, he never has another cup of coffee at home and stuff like that. Whereas like if it's some sort of schedule thing, like this certain person always does a certain thing on Tuesday too, like it'll take me a while to notice that. But if I'm taking a walk and the same vehicle drives past me twice, I immediately notice that. Or we're watching some like the physical elements of something that are just pique my, like we were watching some random movie review about this like terrible horror movie. And because my girlfriend's huge into like movie reviews and this movie nerdery, and the actress who is playing this they had her in some skimpy costume, obviously, and she had like randomly, like surprisingly, like muscular legs. And I wasn't just being a pervert. I mean, I am definitely a pervert, but this I was just like, why does this girl have such strong legs? And then like a few minutes later, they were like, oh, she does all this martial arts stuff. And it's like, oh, okay. Like I noticed just random physical things, or, you know, and I think that's why, to me, when I initially started like carrying all the time, I was like worried that people were, oh my God, you're gonna see like the first time you conceal carry, it feels like the gun is like enormous, you know? And then you realize like nobody notices anything. And I've had times where, because out here, open carry is legal too. And there's been people that I've seen open carrying have been like, cool, right on. Um, but like my girlfriend didn't even notice. And I'm just like, oh, like you didn't see the gun they were carrying. And so I just like notice things like that, like, oh, why is this that way? Why is this, you know, but only when it's like visual and spatial. And that becomes very important when you're in these situations where your lifestyle may seem the same, but around you, everything else is there's gonna be that big gap. Our doors and windows are not covered in rebar yet. You know what? Did I upgrade to 10 millimeter as in like a Glock? No, I've never even shot a 10 millimeter if I can recall. Right now, I can't because I've made it a mission to just carry everywhere now. It's actually a good mindset shift to say, instead of saying like, where can I carry or can I carry, to just be like, I carry all the time now. So to me, the option is not, am I carrying today, as long as it's somewhere that I legally can do it and it's not something that's dangerous or stupid. Like if I'm jumping in the ocean, I'm not going to have my gun on me. But, you know, barring these weird exclusions, when I go to step out the door, my thought process is no longer, can I carry right now? It's how am I carrying? So the choice becomes, am I going with and I'm carrying right now, sitting in here at home. I've got the 43X MOS on, and that is my main one. So the option is it going to be that, or is it going to be the LCP? What type of holster is it going to be? Is it going to be the regular holster? Is it going to be like a belly band or something like that? So really, I carry, I don't want to say 100% of the time, because like I said, I'll have to go to the airport, have to go somewhere where you're not allowed to, somewhere where it might be unsafe, but it's just all the time now. So who's asking me about, let me see. I'm going to go back to the comments real quick. Must have recognized the great hair. Yeah, dude, the hair is, I'm glad I have it. I'm a narcissist, so I'm happy about my Johnny Bravo hair. Hey, from Denver, welcome to 2024. CLM says, how's your health? Is your back doing better? It's doing a lot better. Honestly, now, my big problem is working back into the physical stuff at a pace that makes sense. Like I am super bad mobility because I basically haven't done much for the past year other than sit. And obviously healing from the surgery itself probably tightened everything up, but like lower back, hamstrings, and my calves for some reason, weirdly, are just super tight. Like certainly can't touch my toes right now. So I have to, a lot of stretching to do, and I just want to make sure I don't do it too quickly. I can work out again, but I like way overdid it just a couple days ago. And not even like for the back, the part of my back that was cut, but I just did like a couple sets of face pulls and some rows, and like just because I haven't done anything in a year, my whole upper back and like neck like locked up, and I was just like, oh, couldn't move for like 2 days, just in like regular soreness, not like injury. Didn't feel anything in the actual like surgical part of my back, but I don't know how some people can go. Like if you have not worked out pretty consistently over the last 6 months, and the one thing I hear a lot of people say is they'll be like, oh, I'm fairly active. Man, if you have to do something actually dynamic, like wrestle with somebody, sprint, drag someone out of a building or something, you will, if you're not physically regularly working out and doing semi-similar things, you might be able to do it if you're active, but you will be destroyed. And the chances of you getting injured from doing it, much less just incredibly sore for days, are super high. So I think that's one of the things that a lot of people in general, specifically men, always overestimate their physical capabilities. But that's another element of it, is not just what you can do in the moment, but how is it going to mess you up, injure you, how sore are you going to be, that sort of thing. You definitely don't want to have anything nice in Mexico City. Yeah, just stuff like that, like the ability to walk around with phones and watches and bags and whatever, and not have to always worry about someone running by and snatching it, stuff like that. Upgrade to 10 millimeter. That's what I said. Are you talking about a weapon? Because I have yet. Someone wants to buy me a 10 millimeter. I'll take one. I think it'd be great. But I almost never carry. I can basically say I never carry like a full size. That's just too big for me. I'm not a big person. Even in the winter, what's great in the winter because you can carry it easily with something like this. But just like a full size, like a Glock, even 17, or I mean, even a Glock 19 is just too big. It's perfect, I think, for the 43X MOS. Two bricks look like a horse. Yeah, I got the wall poking out there too. I'm glad you're feeling better. Great news. Appreciate it. 10 millimeter is an upgrade. That's a double illusion. Yeah, I'm not sure what horse you're looking at. But I think one of the best things you can do when you've made that, first of all, is like I said, make the decision that it's going to happen, and instead make a carrying, as far as talking about carrying concealed. And then because now I just like it where we go will even factor into it. Like, am I going to go to this place? Like, I just met up with a friend on the strip the other day, and they wanted to go to some like club, and I was like, can't go there. Literally, they won't let me in because they wanted you. Secretly, I'm an old man. I didn't want to spend $90 for like a drink in a club anyway. But like in the casinos, you can still walk around with it here. I think some of them probably have rules against it, but this isn't a place where the rules carry the force of law. So you got to check your own area. But yeah, I did. I had a couple issues with pocket carry before. Mainly is that there's temperature swings here, so I will take off jackets and stuff. Drawing is iffy, and I've just got it to where I've made a few tweaks, and I've got it down to where it is not uncomfortable. I really like the setup I have now for carrying inside waistband, appendix, and even for something as large, feels large. When like I said, if you have to carry all the time. 43 MOX, 9 millimeter, 15 rounds with the shield arms, plastic or metal magazines. I switched out the mag catch as well, so you don't have to worry about it wearing out with the metal magazines. And I carry that all the time. And the biggest changes I made that made a big difference is getting a good holster that has like the wing on it, or the claw they call it sometimes, that helps push it instead of keeping it a lot more in line with your waistband. The wedge, a foam wedge, like it's like a sticky pad of foam that puts in the bottom of the holster. So where it like would touch onto your lower abdomen or groin, it's a foam pad instead. So that also helps push the bottom out and the top handle part closer to your body, but also there's a comfort issue there as well. And getting clothes that work well. I found a nice set of or brand of button-up shirts that I can wear even in summer that are long enough. Because I have an issue with I'm kind of tall, not in general, I'm only 5'10", but for my build, I'm pretty tall. For someone who like I'm not, I've like a kind of small frame. So shirts that fit me are usually made for people who are not as tall as me. They're going to be like 5'7" or something. So there's a lot of issue with I don't like big baggy stuff. So if I'm wearing a shirt that fits me and then it's way too short. So I found some brands that are long enough so that I can carry without worrying about being um, flashing all the time. And it's not an issue here in terms of you're not going to get arrested for because open carry is legal, but you could potentially get kicked out of a casino or a business. And also, I just don't like that like nagging having to worry in the back of your head about like, oh, when am I reaching for something in the store, doing anything? If you don't have that like develop that weird hunch from like trying to not uncover your gun. So it's just that little stuff that removes all those little friction points from carrying. So the physical friction points, like literally how it's rubbing and hitting on your body, and then the mental ones, and carrying around the house, like just leaving it on all the time. And or not all the time, but almost all the time, to where I literally forget about it. And making sure you have the right pants, the right holster, the right clothes, the right gun for your frame, and all that stuff, right belt, all that, just tweaking it makes a big difference. And I will say, the good thing is like if you're going to carry like an LCP, wear something like the 43X or the SIG P326 around your house, like to say, I'm going to wear this all day. And then when you finally throw on like the one size smaller, you'll be like, this is nothing. And you can do the same too. If you're planning on carrying something like the 43X or the SIG P326, P326, then carry a 19 around the house all day, and then throw on that one, and it'll be like, oh yeah, that's not too bad. Hey, what's up, Brian? Thanks for stopping in. So that's, and honestly, like I said, just having, because people will hate on like the so-called senorita pistols, like the LCP, but it's not really about what's better. It's like once you've made that determination of like I am going to carry, giving yourself that option is makes it hugely easier to where like it's going to happen. The only question is whether it's this gun or this gun or this holster or this shirt or that shirt, or I'm going to this restaurant instead of that bar, that kind of thing. And once it's just like that's it, that's what's happening, it doesn't feel nearly as bad because then you're not thinking about like, oh, should I? It would be kind of uncomfortable. You're just thinking about like, how am I doing this? And it's a lot better that way, I think. Still haven't had to, but because it's getting gnarly. I mean, like, I definitely, it's not crazy in a city like Vegas, but it depends more on where you're at. But it is a big city, and there is weird stuff that'll just happen randomly. Yeah, definitely become an expert. Oh, that's another thing. I'm probably gonna make a whole video on this. I told you guys I was gonna ramble and be all over the place. This isn't even on my list, but there was a big kerfuffle on Twitter. Not big because I think this is something that at least 80 to 90% of people who conceal carry regularly agree on. But Brownell's Twitter account posted something about carrying with an empty chamber. And it was pretty obvious to me that their tweet and little test that the guy did was in support of carrying chambered because they were like, can we stop the debate? And it was a guy who timed his draw to his first three shots with it chambered and not chambered. And it was like half a second difference because he was lightning fast. And everyone, because he was so fast, some people thought that this was saying that it doesn't matter, even though he had it like in quotation marks. And it was obvious to me that they were saying you should carry concealed because he was so lightning fast that it was only half a second difference between three shots or the first shot on target. But that half a second because he was so fast represented like a 60% increase in his time to his first shot on target. And that's only one of the elements. So first of all, most people are not going to be nearly as fast. If you're that well practiced to where you can get your first shot off from concealment to first shot in less than a second, even with racking the slide, you were competent enough and practiced enough to carry with the chambered anyway. And even at half a second, there's plenty of situations where that might matter. And there's a whole host of other reasons why you don't want to carry with an empty chamber because most people are not going to be that fast chambering. You might, in a stressful situation, you might mess up the chamber. You might short stroke it. You might not be able to use one hand. And also, there was a lot of like the few people who were saying, obviously a lot of them weren't even people who carry all the time anyway. They're just like, well, I think so. The main reason is that people feel uncomfortable with it chambered and they think something just bad is going to happen. And I'm like, if you're in that level, you shouldn't be carrying a gun to begin with. And they were like, well, I would carry chambered, and if it was a situation where I thought it was a high risk, and I would carry unchambered if it didn't. So they had these like list of scenarios, like if I wouldn't carry chambered if I was at the Applebee's, but if I was walking through a bad neighborhood or something, then I would. So I'm like, so what about when this transitions? You're at a gas station, you see a shady car roll up, and like, okay, now you're in a situation where you think you should carry chambered. You're gonna pull your Glock out and rack it real quick and then put it back. Doesn't make any sense. It's just a whole and I don't think I would venture to say that if you're competent in practicing firearms, it's assumed by them that it's riskier in some way to carry with the around chambered. But when you're talking about the additional risks that could come up of you having to pull it out and rack it, being slower to act, like I'm not even sure that it is actually riskier. And the only risk of carrying chambered is some kind of ND, because people talk about like, oh, what if you like pulled it out and dropped it? And I'm like, modern guns don't even really work that way. For a modern gun to like go off when you drop it without the trigger being pulled, um, it has to be some kind of freak accident. So if you're talking about freak accidents, then they can happen with anything. Like there is risk associated with carrying a weapon. Of course, there always is. But we're talking about overall what is the best, course of action. And I think the risks that arise from a competent trained person carrying with a weapon unchambered are higher than the risks that they would face overall than carrying with it chambered. And if you have those extra little fears, you can have a weapon. Like I have this sitting here. This is a Taurus PT 709 Slim. And as you can see, it has an external safety on there. And the safety is different than a than having to wrap the slide because you can still do it with one hand. You can do it in the process of posting. That hand is and the safety comes off while you don't have to use. It's a much easier motion to do. Stressfully, you just swipe down. You're much less likely to screw it up, that sort of thing. So if you're really still worried about it, you can use it or 1911, something like that that has an external safety. All right, what's it? Click thumbs up. Feel free to share screen for that clip. Oh, did he send me a clip? I didn't. Which clip are you talking about? SBQR. So anyway, so I'm ranting. Yeah, exactly. And Into the Wilderness, that's assuming you'll be able to put two hands on the gun. Right. You might not be able to. They might be injured. You might be like physically having to wrestle with someone comes up and grabs you, whatever. Um, it's just adding steps for no reason, only because of a fear that like, oh, I don't know, it might go off or whatever if it's chambered. And Tom says always rotate your chambered round every couple of weeks because oil from the chamber can creep into the powder, create a squig round. Yeah, and another one is that I think Magic Prepper had a video once that if you are in the hot habit of, you know, clearing your weapon and stuff every time, and then putting it back in later when you want to carry it, a round that has been repeatedly chambered can actually get inset too much. Like it actually smashes the bullet in if it's getting repeatedly chambered. Because bullets aren't made to be chambered 50 times before getting fired. So keep an eye out for that too. So you want to cycle through. And then also probably every time you go to the range, it's a good habit to blast through that round or that magazine of ammo that you carry, not just to cycle it, but to make sure that it's still working. It's not super old. Make sure your groups and your target picture is on site for that particular ammo, that particular load and everything, and not just your training ammo. I don't see a link, man. It might have gotten sent to the cornfield. Try it again. Also, I can't, you won't hear sound. Any link I believe, even if I share screen, like because of the headphones and the setup I have, like any link I screen share with, you guys won't see it. All right, so we're gonna go totally different direction now. We've talked about random women's thighs on movies and how it relates to situational awareness. If you missed that one, you'll have to rewind it. Talked about concealed carrying everywhere and loaded weapons pointing at your nards. Um, there's another before we move on, there was another video that a guy did. Obviously there's a risk associated with, like I said, weapons. If someone's heard, send me an email if you guys have actually seen instances of where someone did everything right and somehow shot themselves because they were carrying appendix. So there was I think the biggest way to eliminate that risk, I think, would be to never draw or holster, specifically to never holster when you're sitting down. Because there was a guy who did a video with using simunitions, which is a real gun. It just has like a chalk round, where he was purposely trying to see what it would take to shoot himself either the leg or the groin while carrying appendix. It was all done standing though, and it was actually he found it very difficult, especially if you maintain a good posture and a good, obviously good safety stuff, to shoot yourself when standing with appendix carry. It's possible, you're usually going to graze your leg or something like that. So I think sitting, obviously, when your leg is portion of your leg or your nuts are in the way. What's up, David the Good? Glad to show up. I click on your link a lot to use for buying Amazon. So let me know if that works. Have you seen random stuff like cardboard shipping boxes and stuff show up on your Amazon affiliate? Let me know. And fishing related items for the kids. Yeah, me and David need to do another meetup. Next time I'm back in that way in Florida, we did a live interview. There's a live interview on this channel with David from way back in the day. But we need to meet up again. Yeah, years ago he was. Yeah, and he knows about the SB Kira knows about that one. But we should do another live meetup at some point. But anyways, yeah. So if you're sitting, I think that would be the risk because that's when more of your body is in the way. And if particularly if you're reholstering, then the trigger is exposed. So I think the big in my mind, I don't know of any of the incidences where this has actually happened to figure out how to work around it, but it's pretty rare to begin with. And if you do not holster while you're sitting and you try to limit drawing while you're sitting, I think the risk is going to be very, very minimalized if you follow all the other gun safety rules and you practice well with keeping your finger off the trigger, specifically while reholstering. Because with drawing, if you have a real holster, it's really not going to be very possible to get your finger on the trigger until it's completely out anyway. So unless you're like drawing in a way that you're like pointing it at yourself, um, but that's not specific to the inside the waistband. And I've just found that first of all, the drawing is obviously the quickest from appendix carry, and the comfort across all scenarios, sitting, standing, walking. Some of the other positions are better for certain versions of that, but none of them work for all of them in the way that a good appendix carry setup does, in my mind, with the exception of, actually on your hip, if you can get away with that, where it's just completely out of the way. Um, but I've even had some bigger setups on the hip, like open carrying, outside waistband on the hip can get in the way of sitting in like vehicles and stuff with the seatbelt, and then if the pistol handle sticks behind you, it can be a little bulky. Into the Wilderness says, I'm built like a pencil eraser, so that's a precision shoot for me. Yeah, right. One of those guys who has to run around in the shower to get wet. It'd be hard to hit yourself from 3 inches away anyway. And I'm not entirely different. Like I said, I'm fairly tall, only weigh about 100, especially after my surgery, not being able to work out for a year, wasting away. Look at this neck, pathetic. I'm like 155 right now, so not a lot of extra stuff to lumps on here to hide things. That's where the winter hoodie comes, because it's so much nicer to just not have to worry about the anything related to concealed carry. Just throw on your jacket or your hoodie. Still right there. Years ago, they were laughing who's going to die first in Florida. Yeah, it was fun, man. That was great. We got to. Oh, that's no good, man. Built like that guy who was just seen in the what is it? He jumped in the water at one of the Bass Pro Shops or something, and he had like a micro peen that you couldn't even see in the video. F in the chat for that poor fella. He's immortalized as having a micro peen and being flabby and crazy. I don't even know what the story was behind that one. But yeah, we have I have a good friend who just moved to the area where I'm pretty sure David the Good is located these days. So definitely be there one of these days. And yeah, that was like he had the inverted. Oh, if I ever like I have a lot of video on me on the internet, so hopefully something like that will is what will make me famous, not something like, well, I don't have a micro peen to begin with, so that's good. I like outside waistband 5 o'clock, it relies on shirt and tucker jacket. Right. And there's physical limitations to any of it. Outside waistband is obviously overall the most comfortable, but there's just limitations to that. And that's one of my major, not beefs, but that's my thoughts on open carry. I absolutely, of course, as you can guess, think it should be 100% legal to open carry. And I'm glad that there's people out there that do it. I personally feel like I really don't want people to know that I'm carrying most of the time. And so that's my main reason for not doing it. I actually have positive feelings when I see someone like walking around in Walmart just with the regular, sane people, not the ones who have like 4 assault rifles and like, we've seen the pictures of the crazy people, but who just carrying a weapon like I am, and they're doing it in a responsible, normal looking way. And like I said, most people do not even notice. You could have a gun, most people aren't even going to see it. And so I'm glad when people do it, but I just think for me, the advantage of not people not knowing I have it there is really, really big advantage. And I want to maintain that most of the time. So that's my main reason for rarely carrying open carry. But if when I'm going out to go shooting or stuff like that, I'll stop at a gas station, fill up, or get a coffee with just fucking. So, and I love that that's an option, especially like I've said in situations where there is a shit hit the fan event, but you never know. Like in Katrina, where there's like quasi rule of law, where you're going to get mugged by a roving gang, but then the cops are also going to stop you further down the road. Where I want to be open carrying, and I will want it to be legal too. and not having to count on like, is this a bad enough that there is no rule of law, or will I all of a sudden come across the police and get lit up after having to come across people making a roadblock to steal my stuff, that sort of thing. So, all right, let's move on. I'm going to be doing a video this week of review of Leave the World Behind. So keep an eye out for that if you love the movie reviews. And I oh, there was two people recently. It's been in the news a lot about how Costco and Walmart are selling gold. There's a couple good videos recently. Um, Praxis Prepper made one that was good heads up, because one of the good things about buying from Walmart, buying the gold and silver specifically from like Walmart, is that it's just one price for no matter what you're purchasing. You know, if you have to purchase on a credit card, debit card, doesn't matter. It's just that's the price. So if you go onto Appmex or these other dealers, usually you only get the real or best price if you do a wire or a check, and then it goes up from there based on crypto, and then credit card is usually the most. It's actually more expensive. That's not the case with Walmart. It's just the price. So you can put on a credit card and get the points. The thing to watch out for, though, is while the precious metals dealers do not charge sales tax, usually Walmart always does, which in most of our states is more than enough to make up for the additional cost of credit card to make it not a good deal. But there are some people who live in areas where you don't have sales tax, or for whatever reason, you don't have to pay it or whatever. And so then it could be worth it to get all the points, put it on a credit card, and still pay that lower price. But just watch out for it. And then I just today saw an interesting video from High Desert Pioneer. You guys should check out his channel. He's on like his second iteration, I think. He's been a long time. We've been long time mutuals, as the kids say. And I think he got, maybe it was his Twitter that got banned. I think his YouTube's been there the whole time, and his Twitter got banned at some point. But he was making a video talking about an interesting thought about the Walmart Costco thing, is that if it turns out, because they're doing mass volume, almost certainly getting this stuff from like Chinese sources and whatever, if it's not the mint stuff, but um, if something comes out that it's fake, any one of them, if someone even claims like, oh, I got a fake, like they go to turn a fake one back in and try and get a refund or whatever, that it could have weird impacts of like on the markets. I'm not particularly worried too much about fakes, because when it comes down to it, it's not that hard. And most of the real vendors, coin shops, the pawn shops, the mints, and the refineries, they have ways to actually test this stuff. Um, but So I'm not too worried about it. And if you're ever worried about something fake, take it into a pawn shop and be like, hey, I'm thinking about selling this. And then if in the process of giving you a quote, they might want to test it. And then if they're a good enough fake, it's probably not going to matter anyway, because you would have to do all sorts of like the X-ray type testing. And it's not particularly easy or cheap to make fake gold coins, if I'm not mistaken. You have to use metals like tungsten and stuff, which are still kind of expensive, still kind of hard to get. They still have to match the right mixture and dimensions and everything. So it's certainly possible. There are fakes out there. It's not something that someone can do in their garage most of the time, unless I'm completely mistaken. Yeah, it's a good point. Matthew Stone said, I wouldn't have to pay sales tax if I asked to break a 20. It's a currency exchange, not a sale. Yeah, I mean, it should be. And that's an interesting kind of loophole a lot of times too. If you buy some of the US Mint coins, specifically like the $50 gold buffaloes, and you want to travel, let's say on a plane, and you have four $50 coins, that is $200. It's no difference than if where'd he go? Got my little, oh, here he is. This beautiful 50 cent, silver 50 cent piece. This is 50 cents. So if I go on the plane, I don't have to tell them, well, I'm declaring 10, but whatever that's worth in metal. Even a penny is worth more in metal than, or older pennies anyways, than what the face value is. So as long as it is a currency, you technically only have to declare what this currency is. Now, you might get some people up your ass about it, but that is the legal standard as of right now, is that currency is currency. And you can even pay someone $50 and they can write on their taxes, I got paid $50. And whether that's a $50 bill, roll of quarters, or 5 rolls of quarters, or a $50 gold piece, that is $50 in US money. And now if you went and sold that, you are technically supposed to report the I guess it would be capital gains. I'm not a tax professional, by the way. I'm a brokey who almost never has to deal with tax issues. And for any of you government types watching this, I usually make so little money that I wildly overestimate the amount I have to pay just because it doesn't even matter. I'll have to pay an extra 50 bucks or whatever, and I'd much rather do that than have these guys up my ass in 6.5 years or something. That's why I'm really not worried about an audit because like they could find out that I like messed up my taxes by like 50% and I would still only owe like an extra $500. So I'm like, if you want to spend all that time and money to audit me, be my guest. You're not going to get much out of me, even if I messed it up like about as badly as you could have. It'll still would be like, oh, okay. So now I owe you an extra $800. Annoying, but Missouri silver and gold is legal currency. Yeah, and there are certain states that are making like their own legal tender laws and things like that, which is really cool. All right, the next closest, like, let's see. Washington has a sales tax, but not on precious metals. Thanks, that's cool. Um, Missouri silver and gold. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's interesting. So I wouldn't be worried about. I mean, I'm not personally worried about the fakes. It's something to consider, and if you see something suspect obviously. But and that's one of the main reasons I buy mostly from Appmex because it's not always someone like commented when I think I was commenting on one of the other videos about how Appmex isn't always the cheapest. And I'm saying for any particular product, it's not always the cheapest. But if you just say I want to get an ounce of gold the cheapest possible way, the option is usually going to be on Appmex, whether that's a secondary market, whatever sale they have going on. If you're looking for some specific product like a 2023 American Silver Eagle, their prices aren't necessarily going to be the best, but they're never going to be wildly out of whack either. And I have sold back to them several times too, which I recommend setting that up. If you guys have more than a few bucks in precious metals, if you have, multiple thousands of dollars or more in precious metals, I would recommend going through the process of selling back at least once, even for a small amount, with one or two vendors, either locally or with Atmex, just to know how it works, to get a time frame in your mind, to get comfortable with it, so that you're not doing it for the first time when you're really trying to liquidate quickly or urgent, out of necessity, and just to have a good idea about how it goes. So apparently AI is going to make movies this year without any real people. And in 2025, it will be able to do anything an average human can. Yeah, I mean, they already have like some of these Instagram thoughts that are basically completely fake, and they have like OnlyFans accounts that people are subscribing to and stuff like that. So it's e-girls are going to be most, as usual, women hurt most. But it'll be weird. I definitely don't like that everything is fake. And that was actually one of the things you brought it up. We'll go on to topic number 7 or whatever. And that it is true, and I'm not going to deny this, and this is horrible, and it makes me so mad that everything today is super fake and gay. Just everything. Everything's fake. Food, information, everything is just fake and gay and lies, but not everything. And so there's this weird kind of like defensive reaction that I've noticed among people who, are in our ilk, freedom loving, realizing that everything is fake and gay, but it's caused like I almost want to call it like a cytokine storm of defensive, like informational awareness. Whereas how a cytokine storm is basically when your own immune system gets so fired up and overreacts to the point that that's what's causing the issue and that damages your body and that shit is down to where they literally like you have people like Owen Benjamin who come out and like now they just don't believe anything. Like literally anything. Like I know everything is fake and gay, but they just don't believe anything. Like everything from the moon landings fake to the flat earth to nukes don't exist, viruses don't exist, like just everything. Like it's impossible to they just don't believe that anything that they've ever heard is ever real. And that's not where you want to go with this either. And it's not even a commentary on one of those individual quote unquote conspiracy theories, but just that when it becomes like when your belief system is based off of what the government's telling you, that's a bad thing, even if it's based off it in a completely contrarian way. If you just automatically take the opposite stance of whatever you hear in the news, your beliefs are just as much based on the mainstream news as someone who's buying it all, who's just chugging it hook, line, and sinker. So SBQR says, I'm convinced health and physical fitness are number one areas of preparedness, and it's probably the most neglected by people. Heart disease kills millions. I absolutely agree with you too. And like I said, I don't think most people, especially people who aren't wildly unhealthy, just realize how, far away they are from being like fighting shape, so to speak. Just like how much destroyed you can get by having to drag someone up over a wall or sprint for as fast as you can for 30 seconds or something like that. But anyways, yeah. So I think that's something to watch out for is you should, I don't care which particular element of, I don't believe in science anymore. But this, when I see this like automatic, just nope, it's all fake, then you're just as much closed-minded as someone who says you're stupid for not believing all of it. It's just turtles all the way down. Exactly. And it's, especially when it's stuff that really doesn't matter. You just automatically take that contrarian stance based on just what you're seeing from the mainstream media. That's just as unfree thinking. I don't know what word to use. The earth is flat. Parts of it. I've noticed the exact thing for a while. And like I said, it's almost like the healthy. I totally see where it's going because everything is so fake, like just so fake. Everything from the ingredients, natural flavors to any element of information that you get from the news. There's so much lies and fakery and gayness that it makes sense to just reject everything. But that's not the ideal. You know what I mean? It's safer to do that than it is to believe it all. If you have to choose one or the other, being a complete contrarian these days is going to get you closer to reality, but it's not the ideal. The ideal is to, actually evaluate and have a little nuance and realize what, because that's how insidious this is with most of the information that's presented. They will never just tell you usually a complete and utter lie at every level. They'll sprinkle in elements of untruth while sometimes even major parts of it are true, and that makes it more effective at convincing the normies and whatnot. I don't know. Not believing a single thing the federal government says until they officially deny it has served me well. Well, yeah, like I said, there's a difference between not believing a source and automatically assuming that the opposite of what they're saying is always the truth. The exact opposite. I never believe them either. I just treat it as like I haven't don't have any information on the subject because it's usually not always the complete opposite. They'll sprinkle in, and it's if you get used to how they word things and the kind of sophistry that they are used to kind of employing, you can kind of learn to pick out what they're lying about, you know. And it's rarely just that everything is 100% untrue and the truth is 100% the opposite. That's like I said, that'll get you closer to the truth than believing them, but you never would just want to have an automatic contrarian opinion. But definitely not believing them is a good start. Find your own sources. All right, so what else we got? I got so many. We got a lot of people. Let's go talking to finance for a minute. Um, what do you guys think is going to happen? It appears I was going to make a video. I have on my list of videos. There's going to be one called "I Was Wrong" because I'm not really wrong. It's clickbait. Tricked you guys. I was right, but where my instinct always had been that they would let there be a pretty major crash before before the Fed switched back to easing. And it appears now that that might not be the case, that they're very, very afraid of a actual like depressionary contraction. The money supply has been collapsing. So we are actually currently in a period of a deflationary period in terms of the money supply strictly. And there's some weird stuff specifically going on with the Fed has signaled with their jawboning that they are going to, the credible threats have announced that they're probably going to be pivoting next year and lowering rates. Now, they haven't actually done it yet, and they get most of the benefits of it from saying they're going to do it. But at the same time, once that's priced in, you can't not do it because then the results will be fairly catastrophic once they've already been priced in. And there's some weird stuff going on in the repo markets and the reverse repo markets where to get there aren't actually people available for the banks to lend money to. So in the reverse, at these rates, so at the reverse repo markets are the amount of assets available for the Fed to loan to the banks I mean, for the to borrow from the banks, the amount of and there's both sides with the repo and the reverse repo. And if these amounts dry up, which they are, people like Rafi Farber pointing out that at the current rates, these are going to disappear around, I think, like March. This source of liquidity for the banks, so they have to then go back into that's kind of like a deadline for them, either having to reverse course and do quantitative easing as opposed to quantitative tightening, or we'll see it slam into the wall in terms of a true kind of like depressionary forces. And so it's not, people always focus on the rates, but that's only one element of what the Fed does, like the actual quantitative tight, like their balance sheets is another big part of that, and how they're borrowing and loaning through these repo and reverse repo markets is a huge part of it too. And probably what's going to make a bigger impact in the coming year, because like I said, the minor rate changes are priced in one way or the other already, just from them talking about it. Um, Imagine being the most physically fit person and getting hit by a car on the way home from the gym. I mean, still better than being a fatty and getting hit on the way home from the gym or from the donut shop or whatever. Because it's not about certainties, it's about probabilities. What's better? You need a good compass, because if you get lost in the wilderness, if you walk in a straight line, you end up walking a big circle because one leg is dominant. I mean, not if you actually end up walking in a straight line. That's if you just walk and you think you're going to be going in a straight line. It's potentially, most people tend to drift in one way or the other. But if you've done any sort of land dive, you can do dead reckoning by lining up 3 points. And then when you get to one, pick a third point that's like actually lined up. If you, even without a compass, you can get in a generally good track. And also, if you go even in a generally curved line, if you're able to, obviously rivers and gorges. If you're in the Grand Canyon or something, it's maybe more difficult, but the amount of like true wilderness in the US is not that big. If you are physically capable and have a gear enough to walk 20 to 50 miles in even a slightly curved direction, you're going to hit some sort of civilization most of the time. Few exceptions, obviously, maybe like out here in the middle of the desert. Um, but they did there was that infamous kind of stat from a while back that there's nowhere in the continental United States that you can be more than 100 miles from a McDonald's. I think it's technically a little more. I think it's like 100. The worst spot is like 103 miles from a McDonald's, and that's just McDonald's. That's not counting any other civilization, businesses, at least hitting a road. The amount of walking you have to do most of the time just to get to at least a road or a trail is going to be pretty surprisingly low if you can just hit a straight line in most places in the US. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have a compass and a map, because you should for all sorts of other various reasons. But getting lost in the like truly lost in the wilderness in the US, you have to be a pretty avid outdoorsman going into some pretty remote places most of the time, which is good, but also bad when it comes to, the whole bugging out idea is kind of dead for most people, in the sense of like, I know bugging out can mean a lot of different things. I always stress that, but the idea of just things are getting hairy, I'm going to go chill in the woods for a few weeks or months. There's nowhere you can really be in a hospitable type of woods where you actually would want to stay, where people are too far away. Like, yes, if you come out here in the northern Nevada, western or eastern Oregon, kind of you could just go out in the middle of the literal high desert and put up a tent out there, and you'll never see anyone ever again. But speaking of high desert pioneer, that's where he lives. But most people think of doing it somewhere where you could hunt and get water and have firewood and things like that. Oh, hey, Brian, thank you. I appreciate it, man. Do you think wars will escalate this year, Ukraine, Israel, or the flashpoints in Taiwan or North Korea next? I do think there'll be escalation for sure. I don't know which particular one. I mean, even the last few days, we've seen North Korea and South Korea button heads again. Um, Obviously, the stuff in the Middle East seems to continue to be getting worse. Who knows what's even going on in Russia and Ukraine anymore, but it seems like Russia is continuing to wear them down. And as we continue to get weaker and weaker, in terms of the West and specifically the US, more of these countries will be emboldened to take the opportunity to, activate their pet projects in terms of reclaiming land, going after enemies, whatever. And the more of these fronts that open up, the less, even at our current strength, the less we can direct to each one in particular. So obviously the big ones are, see what happens with the Houthis and with Iran. see what happens with Russia and Ukraine, and then if China decides to do anything. I'm not really that concerned about anything too specifically happening with North Korea and South Korea. Obviously, the big concern there is that North Korea always has an option to go nuclear, but it's very rudimentary. They don't have the hypersonic missiles and the stuff like that. Like they would be very noticeable. They would instantly be just nuked. And like there's no reason why we can't just obliterate North Korea if they started launching nukes. If Russia launched a nuke or China, you can't just be like, "Wow, let's take them out," because they have thousands. They're all pointing at us. They have subs. They have, the Sarmats and stuff like that. So if North Korea, I mean, it's bad for the people of South Korea because it's so densely populated, and even one, you know, Cold War era nuke would be absolutely devastating to them. But it's not something that any other country particularly has to worry about. I've spent years aggregate in the woods and it's extremely harsh. People are delusional, think they can survive on their first try. Yeah, you have to be a very competent and practiced woodsman to be able to actually do that without having the supplies with you. Now, I do think it is fairly simple to live kind of comfortably in a camp type scenario if you've brought food, water, toiletries, and fire starters. Because then all you're talking about is doing without electricity. You know what I mean? Like you have all the basics, and then you can try to work on slowly. But if you're talking about like just actually living off the land for months, most people would fail in ways that you don't even think about. Like people like Chris McCandless, um, who was a pretty accomplished, bum. Like he did not go directly from uh, a normal lifestyle into living in the woods, and he still messed that up because of the harshness of the environment in ways that you wouldn't think about until you've encountered them. But I think a lot of us who have some outdoor experience would be able to exist comfortably for a few weeks, maybe even months, if we had the food and water and supplies. That's not too difficult. You're kind of clamping most of the time anyway. You just shit in a hole. You have your toilet paper, you have your water filter and the water source, and you have a few months worth of food, you're gonna be fine. So like van living, it would be more like van living to where than it would be actually. That's totally doable, I think. If you have a spot picked out in the middle of the desert and a van full of supplies, and one option in terms of your portfolio of plans is to be able to just get out of the city for 3 weeks, that's good to have that planned out as a possibility. But as like a one-way trip into the wilderness while civilization melts down in the continental US, that's not going to work for a lot of reasons. And that's a big one too, is a simple injury. One little sprain or break, and especially if it's just you out there, and then all these other things that you have to do day in and day out, you can't do all of a sudden. One thing though, which I do think people should focus on specifically, maybe a little biased as the maker of the best survival fishing kit in the market, is I think a lot of emphasis is placed on traps and snares in wilderness survival kits, which that is not easy to use if you do not have a lot of experience with it. And even with a lot of experience, it can be a crapshoot with rudimentary traps. Like obviously, if you have Kona bear traps and things like that, it's a lot easier. But with snare type traps and stuff, you have to be pretty good at setting them up the right way, having a decent number of them, finding the trails, using the right bait, all that stuff. And still, it's going to be a crapshoot. If you have access to a source where you can, or location where you can go fishing, you can have never fished before, and there's a fairly good chance that you'll probably eventually be able to catch something if you have a decent supply of fishing gear like that, because fish are so stupid in comparison and to mammals and squirrels and some all they have to do is bite the bait, and they do it wholeheartedly and everything. So obviously I recommend practicing even fishing, and it's a lot easier if you do know what you're doing, but it's a lot easier to get productive fishing if you're rudimentary than hunting or trapping. You have to be good at it. And the gear is a lot heavier, more complicated, stuff like that. Speaking of which, due to supply chain shenanigans, Amazon is currently sold out of these, but newsflash, we're moving up in the world. These can be purchased now at CanadianPreparedness.com. That's right. The man himself has these on his website. I know some of you guys have get your panties in a twist at the mere mention of his name, but to quote The Fugitive, I don't care. So they're on there, which is awesome, which is especially awesome because the people wouldn't send FedEx was being a jerk and had my stuff tied up at customs for the tins. And so now they're sold out on Amazon. They'll be back on there eventually, but let's see what we got here. Reverend Righteousness, I think people need to prep more like Ukrainian refugee than Jeremiah Johnson. Absolutely. Especially now, there are some, like if you are speaking of Canadian prepper, if you're on the border of rural Canada, Alaska, then that option is going to be a lot more available to you. But for vast majority of people, especially in the continental US and the rest of the West, it's much more likely to have to deal with a refugee type situation or civil unrest, all that type of stuff than a wilderness survival scenario. And that's worse. It's harder to deal with because anytime there's a bunch of people around, it's harder to deal with. And there's less resources. There are not natural resources in any meaningful sense in urban or even suburban settings, not in the same way that there is. And population density, all the rest of that makes it way worse, which makes it even more important to focus on that sort of stuff. If you live in a cold climate, positive thing is you have a lot less competition after the first winter. And I've talked about that before when I think it was in the just in general talking about where you want to be. There's sort of a dichotomy to the harsh environments. So like even out here in Vegas, not in the city, but if you're like we were talking about High Desert Pioneer again, where he's at, and just outside the city. So either or super cold areas, super dry areas, super, areas that are hard to get to, maybe high altitude. They're going to be much harder to survive in. But if you're prepared to survive there, you're much less likely to have to deal with a lot of randos because people can't just wander out to your place if you're 150 miles away from the nearest water source in the middle of the desert, or if you're in a place where it gets literally, 20 below zero every winter. You can't kind of half-ass survive there. You have to be real survivor and be ready, prepared. Good evening, South Florida DCL. So I went the full hour talking about the most random collection of topics, just as I meant to. I think I hit all the ones I had on my little weird list. So if you guys have any last minute, or not last minute, but any additional topics you want to go over, I don't want to ramble too much on nonsense. But hopefully one of the later streams will get it. I sent Che and Dan a message on this one, but it was like as usual, only a few hours before the stream. So we'll get them back on eventually. But if you want to see any particular videos coming up, like I said, I'm going to be doing a review on Leave the World Behind. Already watched it, already wrote down my notes, so I just got to film it. And I have a couple other good ideas for some videos that I want to do. And I'll try to get back into more of the regular commentary on his current events too, because there is so much going on. And as much as I prefer to do more prepping related videos, it is of course much easier to just do a real quick chat. It seems to even do better all the time in terms of the algorithm and everyone, even my subscribers watching. So that will continue to, I'll try to do both, obviously, but having something up there a few times a week is going to be my goal. AI surage worms and shit better learn how to hide. Yeah, I mean that's getting weird. I don't like any of the tech problems because they're so much harder to deal with, especially when they're forcing your involvement. Like I was just commenting the other day to somebody about how I hate it so much that you literally can't do anything online without having like address, email, phone, and then you have to do the authorization on your phone and and I know that's for security and stuff, but like you literally cannot do the most simple things without tying in a whole digital profile. Like, I mean, I'm trying to like bid on a storage unit, which I used to be able to just go stand in front of this thing with all the other grubby resellers, but now you have to have to log into the account to do the auction. You have to give them the phone number and then send you the code to log into your account. And it's man, what, you can't even like not have a phone anymore. And I mean, I do have a phone, but I don't like that it's all tied together. And now it makes it even more like it's supposed to be a convenience for you to be able to log into this stuff all the time. But now if you don't have access to your phone or your phone and email and computer, like then you can't log into everything. It's just a mess. I hate that. Do the thing, man. Hit the thumb button thing. Yeah, exactly. Hit that thumbs up. Let me see. We got 76 watching. It says I haven't refreshed, but on my screen it says 0 thumbs up. I'm sure it's more than that right now. Hey, Lady T, it's okay. I'm probably gonna close it up here soon after a couple more viewer questions, but it'll hit on the refresh. I was denied a parcel for not having a smart. Yeah, it's stuff like that. Like it's not some like it's we're not too far away from it being a law that you have to have all this stuff, but it's so ubiquitous now that it might as well be because there's so few people that don't have this or would make an issue about it that the businesses have no reason to even come up with an option for doing it without using a phone or a smartphone or without using the internet. And so they're just like, I don't care. If you're not going to use our business because you don't want to use all this, then okay, because 99.9% of people will. So, okay, 45 thumbs up. That's better. But yeah, I hate that stuff. I just hate it so much because it's so easy. First of all, to me, I don't like that tentacles have to be in everything has to be involved and there's no anonymity or anything like that. But then also, it's just so easy for me to see how when you have 50 different things that have to be involved in even these completely mundane types of transactions, then it's very easy to see how these systems could just get locked up and stop working because people don't even know how to do it without that. So that's what I'm worried about. Even Superman would need a smart. Yeah, exactly. Ridiculous. I really hate it. I hate that because I'm kind of like a troglodyte anyway. And I hate having to use all the tech and it never works the way it's supposed to. And the idea after using like stuff like that, like I'm just talking about the authentication and well, just turn it off and turn it on again. The idea that there's still people out there who'd be willing to put like a Neuralink chip in their brain or something is just absolutely insane to me. Like absolutely insane. How's the cashless situation in the US right now? It's 90% card and phone here in Scotland, and it's not very good. Yeah, again, that's just one of the exact same things that scares me. I would say here in the US, 90% of businesses that I deal with, Vegas is probably better in this regard because of all the gambling and things that you just use cash for. I would say 90% of businesses that you still go into still have the option to take cash, at least in just minor businesses. But we're starting to see it's very rare still, and sometimes they're like not really ready for it. And it's certainly the majority of people don't use cash at all. But most of the time, you still can use cash. But you're starting to see like half the self-checkout things will be like, this one is card only, no cash, no debit. Um, and you're starting to see them pop up, where it's like no cash business or anything, which I think I I would prefer. I really hate government involvement in general, but I think that should be illegal for you to not even accept cash. Definitely should be if you're a government operation. Um, but yeah, it's for the most part you could still get away with it. You wouldn't notice a huge difference other than some like slowdown, weird looks maybe. Most regular businesses can still process cash. What's up, ethical preparedness? Only be here for a little bit. It's bedtime for this old man. No worries. I'm probably about to only go for another 5 or 10 minutes anyway. But appreciate you showing up, and the replay will be there if you want to catch it later. South Florida DCL says I've subbed you for a very long time when you're putting out some new content. I appreciate it, man. I really do, and I love seeing some of you guys. I'm not sure if you're one. I know you've been here a while, but if you have it like set to public for who you subscribe, I see the badges. It shows me subscribe 7 years, 9 years, 5 years, and that's just awesome to me. Very humbling. Um, yeah, but I've got new content coming. I've been slacking for this for a while. But this week or this coming week. Reverend Rachel said some smart lawyers should start a class action for failure to take legal tender. Yeah, but I don't know what they would base that. I mean, like I said, for the government, they could probably make that claim, but it would be, I hope they do that. I do hope they do that. And Brian says, can you do a review on best boots for shit fan? You know what? I absolutely have that like ready to, I have a whole outline for that exact topic. I definitely absolutely need to do that video soon. So I will, Brian, definitely. If I haven't done that in like a couple weeks, send me an email. And because we already have the outline ready to go. And I just need to talk about it. It's important. And yeah, freedom seeds for all. There's a lot of no cash business here, especially restaurants, hotels, and most stores. Yeah. Yeah, it's like the higher you go up in terms of the amounts, the less likely they are to take cash, hotels, things like that. And a lot of times they'll have weird restrictions like, oh, you can pay with cash, but you still have to have a credit card on file for expenses. And so they don't really just accept cash. Or if they do, it's like some absurd thing like, okay, well, you have to put a security deposit down for like $2,000 a night or something stupid like that. So they're all ridiculous. I won't buy it from a local store that won't accept cash. Yeah, I don't like doing it. Like I said, there's not too many out here that overtly say no cash. Um, but I really don't like to see it, and I try to use it. And it sucks because it is more convenient to use cards most of the time, and especially if you do play you can get a lot of cash or just free money from credit card points if you do it intelligently, things like that. Hung over for my January 6th party. Right on, sir. Yo, R2W just came from the Tribes channel. Sounds good. Appreciate it. Like I said, I'm wrapping up here pretty soon, but you can watch the replay. Yeah, let me give you one last question slash topic, then we'll call it a night. Who's gonna be? We'll do one last question. Yeah, CBDC is that's not a question, but they definitely want to. I am happy that I'm seeing some state level and lower politician level pushback to CBD type stuff because that would be absolutely the nail in this coffin of just everything being interrelated and controlled. And especially after what you see Western countries do to like the Canadian truckers, where they shut down your bank account and stuff. They could make regional zones. They could make certain types of purchases. What's your thoughts on some states passing laws banning cashless? That's the type of stuff that I'd like. I think it should be like mandatory. Like I said, as much as I am libertarian in general, it's obvious to me my later years that if you just let things run rampant, then the worst of the people are the ones who end up making all the decisions. So you have to kind of set some laws stopping shenanigans. And I think that yeah, I think that's a good thing. I think that it should not be forced to go cashless. There should always be that option for anonymity, physical storage, that sort of thing. So I'm happy to see that. Give some glimmer of hope that at least there might be one or two states that we could all move to for a last stand. If I'm not mistaken, they're mostly like Midwestern, Missouri, stuff like that, I think is one of them. And I think it should be mandatory that you have to take cash and with some minor exceptions. But do you think there'll be several states that will pass laws? I hope so. I haven't looked enough into how well these type of for these laws or these bills or whatever that are being presented or suggested, how far they've gotten, how much support they have. But I have heard of them, so I have no idea whether they're going to pass or not. But the fact that they're at least being brought up is to me a very good sign. And all right, Brian. Yeah, I will sign off now too as well. So take care, everyone. And you will be seeing more videos on this channel. Sorry, I've been slacking. I am alive and doing better and better. So appreciate it. And you guys I hope you had a Merry Christmas and a good New Year.